Hi, it's March 25th, 2025. I've got a good friend of mine, John Venturo, former police officer, and he's going to be going into politics. Welcome to my domain, the Donadio Domain Podcast. John, I've known you for a while. I really appreciate you coming on board today with us. You know how much I like police and first responders. You've done a lot, and I want to hear all about it. Where and when was your first law enforcement job?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it, Barry. Love to talk about these topics, so I am more than happy to be here and discuss it. So, my law enforcement career was sort of an end around, right? So, people like to look at where I ended up, and they're kind of enamored by some of the things that I may have done. But the truth about it is, I started on the very, very bottom, right? So, as you and I know, living on Long Island, in the summertime, there's an influx of folks that live on the East End. So they don't need the same complement of law enforcement during the year that they do in the summertime. So when I got out of the Navy and I came back home, I was kind of looking for something related to that type of work and that discipline. And law enforcement is a perfect segue, as you know, for military folks.
Sure.
And at the time, if you recall, both Suffolk and the NYPD had about a 4 to 6 year gap in between testing. So if you missed it age-wise, you were out for at least 4 years, in some cases 6 years, depending upon the needs of the city or the needs of the county that you and I lived in. However, the sort of end around to do that would be one of the East End departments, and there's a bunch of village and town departments on the East End in Suffolk County, New York. Those departments look for police officers to come and help augment their staffing needs during the summertime. One of the departments on the East End, the larger departments, is East Hampton Town PD. I was very lucky, and they picked me up in 1995. And I worked there during the season, which basically, for the most part, is from Memorial Day through Labor Day. And then they'll let you go and you do whatever it is that you do in your normal work. And then you come back the following season. There are some people who do this for a long time. There are some teachers who do this for 20 years and they collect an actual extra pension. For me, it was a way of getting New York State certified as a police officer and getting my name into that pension system. So I was lucky enough that in my off season, if you want to call that, when the folks from East Hampton Town let me go at the end of the season, I went and worked in the town of Islip where I lived, and I believe you lived as well, for the town of Islip Harbor Police. And I was on a police boat. So I did basically East Hampton Town during that season, the busy season in the Hamptons. And in the off season, I did the boat, so the police boat. And I absolutely loved it. It was a phenomenal point in my career. I was learning a lot as a young new officer, and I was on both the Suffolk County Police list as well as the NYPD. So the NYPD called first. So I left East Hampton Town PD. I went to the NYPD Academy in 1998, and that was an absolute phenomenal experience for me. And I know there's a lot of people who have sort of not so great experiences with the city. I have to tell you, I was absolutely excited. One of the things I'm going to tell you, Barry, when I walked through those gates, those doors at the police academy, and it said, "Through these doors walk the greatest cops on earth." And I truly felt that way. I was all in. I absolutely loved
I
it.
would agree with that statement. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
And
And it was one of the few.
if I can interrupt
Sure.
you, let me tell the viewers, okay, John, getting on East Hampton Police at the time, or even Islip Harbor Police, that was no easy feat. Trust me, this man was cream of the crop to get those jobs. It was extremely competitive. I think it would be just like as competitive as being a supermodel or something, trying to get a photo shoot. Almost impossible. So it's a feat in itself. And he's talking about it like nonchalant, no big deal. But you try getting on those jobs back then, and it's very hard. I congratulate you for even getting on those jobs. They were very slim to go around. You couldn't get them. You just couldn't get on those jobs. So congratulations to you for that. Now, NYPD and all these agencies, they're special to me. East Hampton, wow. I mean, who could say they've worked East Hampton Police, living the dream in the Hamptons as a cop? Wow. But
Yeah.
let me hear more about NYPD because I love them too.
Absolutely, and that's true. So I did work really, really hard to get on to those
Yeah.
those agencies, And I always say, and we'll get into what I did ultimately, every single thing I did along the way helped me ultimately be the best officer in the end. Every little piece along the way helped. So I was lucky enough, I got into the NYPD, and at that time, you needed either a college degree, you needed a 2 or a 4 year college degree, or you have to have served military service, period, of no less than, I think it was 2 years. So it was very selective at that time for the NYPD. It wasn't just like it
Well,
is now.
yep.
There's an ongoing exam, and it really doesn't matter how you do. They'll call you as long as you pass. It was a very different environment. It was very competitive. And so I spent my 2 years with the NYPD. I took the Suffolk County Police test, and I actually scored 105 on it. And I remember this because,
So
yeah,
no one, everybody's confused now. I know what you're talking about, but
yes.
everybody watching is like, well, how does this guy get 105 on a test? Why don't you tell us how you got that?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the good things is that everyone along the way, from my time with the East Hampton Town PD into the Harbor PD, they mentor you. And that's something that we'll get into in a little bit of my personal business. Mentoring and having officers that are older and experienced talk to you about testing, processing, what you should be reading, how you should be prepping for these exams, right? All that is pivotal, right? It's critically important in getting into the upper echelon of the testing, right? So just to give you an example, when I got hired by Suffolk County PD, there was 41,000 people took the test. And out of 41,000, and I remember these scores because I was in the 107th precinct in Queens South at the time, and my
Wow.
list number was 107 and my score was 105, which means there was 106 people that still scored better than me with 105. And the way you do that is two ways. They put a few what they call test questions on the exam, meaning it's the normal, say, 100 questions if it was 1 point each, which it's not, but say it was 100 questions, they're all worth 1 point. And then they'll put five additional questions to see how people do with those, and they're extra credit essentially. So you have to get all the questions on the test right, plus the five additional questions, you can get a 105. Or if you have military service, you get 2.5 points. If you
That's
have
right.
combat service, you have 5 points. I didn't use either or because even though I had served, I didn't qualify. So I actually got the legitimate 105 score, which we still laugh about till this day. And at the time, they did a lottery for applicants. So even though I was in that upper score, they took the first 500 and they did a lottery pick. And I didn't make it at first. I didn't make it. So I remember saying to myself, I'm gonna end up staying an NYPD police officer because I didn't make the first lottery cut. Then so many people had failed the physical exam that I was called in about, I think about 2 or 3 weeks after they did the lottery, and I won by finishing the physical exam. Um,
Literally, you won.
yeah, yeah.
You
And
sure did.
then I went out, and then 2000, I made my way into Suffolk County PD in 2000, uh,
Unbelievable.
which again, that was like I still couldn't believe that coming from where I came from to make it all the way into the SCPD
Well,
then.
I got to keep interrupting
Yeah,
because my
of course.
interest, my curiosity is just like sparking. Probably everybody in your precinct in NYPD was trying to get on Suffolk Police on Long Island to probably because they probably lived on Long Island. And they're
Yeah.
like, well, I don't want to keep driving the city. Plus, Suffolk County was probably at that time the highest paid in the country, if I
Right.
remember correctly.
Right.
But out of that list of 41,000 applicants that you took the test, how many did they end up hiring? Because my next point is, ladies and gentlemen, this guy beat out 41,000 applicants. So, hey, I'm former Secret Service, and I think it would be harder to get on Suffolk County Police at the time than it would have been to get on Secret Service, for what that's worth, which
Yeah.
is pretty incredible.
Yeah, I think honestly, it was probably my class. I think it was under 200 maybe in total numbers, and I think there were several classes after mine that were about that. So if you say roughly, I'll say 1,000 maybe were hired over
So
the
they took on Suffolk Police, they actually got 1,000 off of that list.
off of that list. Yeah, because it was probably a
Wow.
4 to 5 year list, I would say, and then with the turnover, because I also hit it at an interesting time where a lot of the officers were coming up on that 20 years, right?
Right.
Um, and then after I got on Suffolk County, as you know, 9/11 happened not long after. And what happened was because of the overtime and all of that, for those folks who don't know, your retirement numbers change predicated upon your last years of service and how much overtime you put in. So if you work an incredible amount of overtime, you almost have to go because if you stay on and in those preceding years your numbers drop because you're not getting the same overtime, your overall lifetime numbers after retirement will diminish versus leaving when you're at that peak. So another thing that happened, which is probably why they hired so many after me, was that 9/11 happened, and then we had this sort of mass increase in overall overtime for the officers.
And then ultimately you ended up serving about 20, close to 20 years in Suffolk
Uh,
Police.
yeah, I did 20 with Suffolk. My overall time was about 23 and a half years. Yeah, 23 and a half years. And the good news is that a lot of people who kind of take the same path that I did, and I encourage that for my employees later on in my business, I encourage that when they go and they take those jobs on the East End or for the departments that will hire you as a seasonal employee, I always found something that complemented that. So you can find jobs that will allow you to work in the off season, such as the Harbor Police or other law enforcement jobs will hire officers in the wintertime if they need for overtime. Ocean Beach Village Police Department does the same thing. Folks can go there and work a certain amount of
Great
hours.
job.
Yeah,
Right.
great job.
Great.
And he's a
But
dear friend of mine.
so, I mean, hey, this guy's living the dream. East Hampton Police, Islip Harbor Patrol. I mean, you had a cigarette boat, I'm sure, right? Because I worked for Islip Public Safety back in '89, and what a great job! What great way to start your law enforcement career. We would see you guys out there. It wasn't an easy job. The Harbor Police did a lot of dangerous work, and we obviously respected them greatly. And then, going to NYPD and then Suffolk. And it gets better, ladies and gentlemen. What did you do in Suffolk Police?
So I spent a couple of years in the Fifth Precinct. Ironically,
Okay.
I had
Which I
lived
love.
the precinct, great
Okay.
place to work. I absolutely loved it. And so I lived in the fifth precinct at the time, which was kind of ironic. And the way that it works in Suffolk County, when you get hired and you go to a precinct, you have to be a relief operator, which means, say there's 20 cars in that precinct. Every day you're going to cycle into a new car, right? You're going to work a different area and you're going to learn the entire county, which I was actually kind of excited about. And so I come into work and I get my assignment for the day and I work that car, and the gentleman that I'm with goes into the precincts, not feeling good. He goes home, and I go over to the boss, and he's like, "Yeah, it's your car." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "That's your car. You're not a relief operator anymore." So I went from coming right on, and then you're supposed to do all this relief work. And I think a lot of it was really based on the fact that I understood policing. I had been through the Suffolk County Police Academy for East Hampton. I had been through the NYPD Academy, and then I had been back through the Suffolk County Police Academy again for Suffolk County. So three academies under my belt. And I kind of understood policing. I'd been a police officer at that point for I think 4 or 5 years almost. And so they just gave me the car. So I literally landed up with the car. And the ironic part was it was in the area I grew up, which they tell you not necessarily to shoot for, but you also want to take the first car that's available. So I was very lucky. I got a car. I rode around the neighborhood I grew up in, my elementary school, everything. It was a phenomenal walking on
What
water.
unit? What unit was that? Which car was that?
At the time, it was a car that no longer exists. It was 517, and I have the plate actually in my
517. It's a busy car. That was a busy car in the fifth precinct, right at the time.
memory. It was the busiest volume car in the fifth precinct, and I
There you
loved
go. Yep.
absolutely loved it. And as you
Yeah.
know, your day goes like that when you're in a busy car.
And what year was that you were 517 unit?
That would have been directly after I came out of the academy. So that's talking early 2000, 2001, 2, 3, 4, right in there.
It's just a small, like we didn't know each other at the time. I was working for Patchogue, the
Oh,
constables, the code enforcement. Back in '96. So it's just amazing how you cross paths with people. And it's like just by coincidence, you were 517 at that, after that, and I was Islip Public Safety, and then you were Harbor Patrol. But this is kind of what Long Island guys do that are in law enforcement. They do all these jobs, whether it's part time or full time. It's quite interesting. My heart breaks for you because you went to three police academies. My God. They really got they really got to standardize this federally and just like, hey, you go through a police academy, it's good everywhere. That's what I think us older guys should be working on, maybe to help out the younger officers, because I understand maybe specific to the agency, or maybe getting a little 3 week catch up for the new area you work, a new department. But my goodness, 3 academies. My hat's off to you. But what else did you do after 517? You're holding out on us, John. What else did you do?
Yeah, but and by the way, it's interesting you say that because a lot of people are like, oh, you transferred from the city to Suffolk. I'm like, there's no transfer.
No transfer.
You
No.
all,
You start as a recruit. You start as they treat you as if it's your first day on the job and you have no experience, right? I mean, that's basically how you're treated in each department as you go along.
yeah, and
So
then just quick story. When I went to the academy, they knew me because I had already been to the academy for East Hampton Town, and I had been to New York City, and then I'm back into the academy, and I remember one of the instructors said, Venturo, come over here, drop, just start doing push-ups, and he just
just because you came back, right?
and this was really it was actually a sign of affection, to be quite honest with you. And he put me
Sure.
into told me to recover, and when I recovered, he said, I just want to let you know you're back. You're back.
That's awesome.
Make sure that I knew, congratulations. That was our way of communicating it at the time that he was happy I was back. And we landed up going on to be friends down the road. But it was interesting. So people think you transfer, you don't. I went to the fifth precinct. I spent my time on patrol, and then highway patrol was looking for officers at that time. And that was sort of coveted because you had to have really high stats, really high activity. And I was lucky because the car that I was in, just by the nature of where I was super busy. So my stats were at the top. My boss came and talked to me. I said, yeah, sure, I'll do it. So then I left probably in, I would say, '03, '04 maybe-ish, right around there. And then went to highway patrol, SCPD highway.
I did not know you were highway.
Yes.
I did not know that. So which unit was your highway unit?
So I was, well, I was a couple, but I was 905 was the one I was the most, 905.
Okay, so that's scary to anybody that drives on the Long Island Expressway. You don't want to hear 905 or 9 nothing. That's Highway Patrol. That's Suffolk County, and they're out there. You better not speed. They're going to pull you over. But another thing, Highway Patrol in Suffolk County, New York, on Long Island, extremely respected. They were your seasoned cops. They knew what they were doing, and they didn't take any nonsense either. If you got pulled over by a highway unit, you better shut your mouth and listen to them. That's how I always played it if I would ever get pulled over. But a great deal of respect for those highway units. And that's honestly from the bottom of my heart. Me, my friends, thanks for what you did there. That's just amazing. That I know you were busy there. I know you've been, and that's dangerous work.
It is dangerous work, and people they think about going into the other stuff that I did, how dangerous that was, and I have to say nothing came even close to highway patrol. Nothing. It was by far the most dangerous thing that I did in my law enforcement career. Standing out there on one of the busiest roadways in the country with 80,000-pound trucks coming past you at 70, 80 miles an hour,
And they're not slowing down with your red lights on. They're not slowing down.
going down.
No.
That was absolutely a place that I was very aware of how dangerous it was. And one of the things that you mentioned about sort of how the respected they are, when I first went to highway patrol, I had a few senior officers pull me on the side. And they said, hey, listen, this isn't the precinct. You don't have 1,000 people. If you key that mic, 1,000 people are coming, right? You're a lone ranger out here. And they're right. I covered from the William Floyd Parkway, for those of you who know New York and the LIE, to the East End, to the Riverhead Town Line. And it's several miles. You're out there by yourself, and you're several miles from anyone anywhere else. So if you go to the Riverhead SCPD border, you're maybe 10, 12 minutes from asking for help on your radio. Now think about that. From a law enforcement perspective, minutes are critical. And if you key that mic and you ask for somebody, you have to be ready to be out there for up to 10, maybe 12 minutes before you're going to get somebody to come up there and help you. So for that reason, they tell you that you have to conduct yourself a little bit differently. You have to be a little bit more aware when you're approaching vehicles. You have to be very aware of where you're going to stop a vehicle. What are the considerations when you're doing that? Because obviously it's a heightened situation in terms of safety. So that was a really dangerous time in my career, but I absolutely enjoyed my time in highway. Now, that being said, I don't think it would have been my career move to stay in highway forever. I personally think it's kind of a grind on you from a safety perspective.
Oh, yeah.
Not for everyone. There are some guys who really enjoy it, and then you can go to different divisions within highway. You can go to motor carrier safety section, which those are the folks that look at inspect the trucks to make sure that they're safe on the roads. You can go to stop DWI units. They have units that will stop. You can go to a motorcycle unit. So there's different things you can do, but actual patrol and highway, in my opinion, it's a safety grind. It's not a work grind, it's a safety grind. So I spent a couple of years there, and then a position open in aviation, SCPD aviation section.
So, yes, ladies and gentlemen, this guy has done everything. What were you doing in aviation? Can we ask John? What'd you do there?
Yes, you can. So, like I said, a lot of my career was timing, right? So I had hit the tests at the right time. A lot of people had retired at the right time. We talked to, which we could always go back to. 9/11 happened, and that really pushed a lot of people out, right? So if you think about the Suffolk County Police Department, depending upon the year and the complement of officer, it ranges anywhere from 11 to 14 in terms of the largest police agencies in the United States. They have a full complement of 4 helicopters, two that service the east end of the island, two service the central portion of the island. So they have 4 helicopters. And as you can imagine, you don't have all that many pilots. And the folks that go there and become pilots and stay as police aviators don't leave. So the joke was, I don't care how good you are. If you're a pilot, you're going to wait half your career. That wasn't the case for me, thankfully. Like I said, I did my time in the precinct, I did my time in highway patrol. In a relatively short period of time, I made my way over, was interviewed for aviation, and then I was hired into the unit, and I went to aviation. I believe it was in 2006. I believe I went to aviation.
So the timing, I mean, you certainly worked for everything. I don't consider you lucky. I consider you very qualified, and the opportunities just happen to get right exactly for the right guy at the right time. Um, I don't say lucky. No, you deserved every bit that you got. Being a pilot for Suffolk County, New York, I mean, that would be good luck getting that job, folks. If you're a pilot and then you want to be a policeman and fly a bird, good luck because it's going to take some time. They're not going to say, "Oh, you just get out of the academy, hop in this helicopter, we're ready to go." You're probably going to be waiting a good 10 years, right? I mean, is that a fair assessment? Something
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Some wait longer, some get in, some just never get in.
and we'll never get in. That's unbelievable. But those helicopters were beautiful, the ones that I've seen that I've been around. And did you fly out of Ronkonkoma or we had
Yeah,
a Ronkonkoma unit?
the good thing is that what they try to do is they try to situate you closest to where you live. But for staffing purposes, you may have to go to either location. So the East End base is the 106th Air Wing, right? So
Right.
the Air Force occupies one portion of the base, and law enforcement and the civilian portion of it occupies the other portion of the base. So it's kind of split out of Gabreski Air Base. That's the East End base, as you're familiar with.
Uh,
And
as I was stationed there, like look, we have so much in common. It's crazy. So, for those who don't know me, I was there from 1994 all the way to 2002, and subsequently went right to the Secret Service from the 106 Rescue Wing Security Police. So love the connection again there, John. Just unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah, and then the West Base is MacArthur Airport. So we operate there. We're a blend right in between civilian aviation and commercial aviation transport at the main hub portion of the airport. So we're right kind of in the middle of it all.
And ESU is right there too. The Emergency Services Unit is SWAT team. So I have a bunch of friends over there too. But wow. And then, so in retirement, it certainly had a great run for a career. In retirement, you again we share another coincidence. You opened a security agency. I opened a security agency. I guess that's what old cops do, right? We do this kind of stuff in our retirement. But you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when I went to aviation, again, it was a dream come true. I couldn't be happier at the time. I was a young dad. I had, kids. I had just bought a house on the East End. I was so happy. My life was perfect, except for the fact that, as well as you do as a Suffolk officer, there's no overtime, or there was at that time really no overtime for the pilots. Like there was a staffing system set up, and then you went in, you worked your shift, and that was kind of it. So at home, to make ends meet, I was looking for something to do to generate additional income so that my wife at the time didn't have to work and she could stay at home and take care of the kids. So a very dear friend of mine who is now a four-star chief with New York State had a great idea during a lunch. Him and I sat down. We became police officers together, by the way. We traveled into the NYPD together. He's now a four-star chief. And we went out to lunch and he said, we should start a company. And at the time, as you know, Blackwater was like a really big thing, post 9/11. And so one of the things that we discussed was, why don't we do everything that Blackwater did, but do it good, do it right, do it properly, and sort of operate above board. And we think we could do that on a local municipal level, not a federal level. So we kind of mirrored the company that we started after that. And we started with two men, a concept, and elbow grease. And we started out, when I tell you, with absolutely nothing. And Larry and I used to joke around about we'd go to these initial meetings where we were trying to bring in contracts for boots on the ground physical security. And I would joke that I was running around the room with a mirror and he had the smoke machine. And we were just talking more conceptually about what we thought we can do rather than what we could do. And I'll just tell you very quickly, we were invited to the World Trade Center to come into the World Trade Center site at 130 Liberty Street and consult with security staff and construction companies that were there to help make the location safer than what it was. And Larry and I had a great presentation and we got the project. And it was the largest application of civilian security at the World Trade Center. And we had just started our company. We didn't have an employee. So we we kind of laughed, walked out. We ran around the corner and I forget the name of it. There's a little Irish bar that's still there, by the way. And they left all the like patina of the marks that had happened from the buildings coming down on the front of it. You could still see it. And we went in there and sat down and I said, well, let's make a go of it. Let's see. And we called in every favor, every friend you could possibly imagine to come down and work for us. And that is launched our company from zero all the way through just about 1,300 employees before we sold it, which was during the middle of COVID.
Wow. So that you gave that a good run and quite an incredible story. And I've heard other stories like that, it's not easy. We may be very good cops and know how to do security, but you have to know how to do business. And that's the thing. I've seen other retired cops kind of do the same thing, and they're very good cops. But it's very hard to do business. We're not businessmen, so it's a learning process. It was for me, trial and error, and thank God, I was able to, make little mistakes and correct them and be better at the end of the day. So, a lot of bumps in the road, shall we say? Not an easy task by any means. And if you're thinking of doing it, if you're watching and you're a retired cop, give me a call. I'll tell you what not to do with business if I could help. Have clients. If you could have clients before you start the business, that's probably the best advice I could give you. Instead of opening a business and then trying to get clients, which are very hard to get. It's very competitive. But so now you're talking about potentially going into politics, which also is what I have done. So again, we're one and the same almost here. But tell me about that. Tell me what you're thinking about doing with the politics now.
Yeah, so without getting too much into an open case, which is what really kind of pushed me into the thought process of judicial reform, and while family courts, which is what brought me into the court system post retirement, that while that's a state level for the most part, there are things that it touches federally that affect everyone in most families and most people statistically. So I, like many people, went through a divorce. I was introduced to a family court system, and what it did is it opened my eyes to really how unfair and how for profit this system really is. And I was thinking about this the other day while I was driving, when we had an ethics class towards the end of the academy. They're talking to making sure that you're going to go out there and make the proper decisions and that you're going to be ethical. And they ask, who do you think in society right now do you think carries the highest weight in terms of ethics? And I said a judge. And I remember people like, a judge? Why would you think a judge? And I just said, well, I just think a person that sits up there and they have the weight of that responsibility upon them. I would imagine that just the job itself would kind of pressure them into doing the right thing, and that's just the bright-eyed, bushy-tailed view of it. And that's unfortunately not the way that it necessarily works. And by it being a for-profit system, without me going too far down that road, I'll give you an example. The state of Texas, they profit 66 cents on every dollar. Every dollar of child support that's collected through the state of Texas goes to the state, right? So it doesn't go to the child. It goes 66 cents on every dollar is going to go to the state. Other states that don't necessarily collect directly from the process of child support or alimony or anything along those lines, they profit from the process, meaning the more cases that are on the docket, the longer these things extend, the more judges that are required to be on the bench. It's one of those things where it's sustenance for them. So if they want to expand the amount of judges or they want to retain the judges that are in place in any given area, they want to make sure that their docket is full, okay? And so that makes it a for-profit scenario. And then let's face it, my brother, who's a divorce attorney for 25 years, very successful, and he's told me, John, I can't tell you the amount of times that I've been involved in cases where opposing counsel will just kind of wink over like, hey, we're going to litigate this thing for no reason, right? So it's litigate, not mitigate. And that's the sad part about it. Now, and I could speak to this part of it because it's kind of done in my case. We went to mitigation first, right? So you're going to go to a mediator and you're going to try to mitigate the scenario. And there's no real incentive to resolve it, right? So you have essentially what equates to a judge. He looks at all the evidence and he makes a recommendation. He talks to both parties impartially. And I was told at that time, at least, that it's a no-brainer. Like you've been more than generous. So if there's not a non-acceptance, don't comply, right? Like, and then what happens is it's not binding in any way. And so these cases drag on and on and on for years and years and years. And it hinders the system. It's costly to the taxpayer, and it's ultimately detrimental to the folks that are involved, both the men and women that are in the system. It usually and unfortunately impacts men more so than women, but it does impact some women. And after being involved in that, it became very clear that there has to be some federal oversight. There has to be some additional compliance rules that are set in place. And one part of it that I can talk about is if an attorney, if an officer of a court at any level steps into court and submits any document to the court, that is an extremely important thing. That judge relies on that information being correct. And that's what his job is to do. He is to ensure that what's being presented to the court is accurate, right? And that reflects the position that attorney is trying to take. In the case that I was involved in, that's not what happened. An attorney went in there and intentionally misrepresented and submitted documents to a court that weren't correct. And so, unfortunately, if you were to go into a courtroom and I were to go into a courtroom, we give testimony, it's perjury. And you could be tried for that. You could be convicted. You could be imprisoned for it. But when attorneys do it, it's an ethical violation. It's an ethical violation. So I think that's a perfect example of where that should be the same violation of law that it is for you and I. It should be for that attorney. They're officers of the court. They're sworn officers of the court. Everything they say should essentially be treated as testimony. And if they give information that's not correct, they should be held to the same standard that you and I are held to. So that's just one little facet. There's a whole bunch of different things, but that was one of the things that really started me thinking down the road of, hey, we need to overhaul the system. This is not a perfect system. And there are so many states where it is worse than the state that I'm in. And you start to hear things now where people are talking about judicial reform, not related to incarcerated folks, which is probably a conversation that's good to have. But if you keep it specific to family law, it's not only resonates on state levels in a multitude of states, but this current administration has already acknowledged that it's a very problematic system that we have, and that they are welcoming legislation to overhaul the system right now in terms of judicial reform. And so that's kind of what got me involved. That's really what motivated me to want to step up. And by the way, I believe, and I know that you and I are both history buffs. So if you really look at an elected official, what his job is, what he's supposed to be charged with, what the founding fathers really wanted was for a person to see, recognize something that's wrong in society, Step up because it's a calling and because you think that your voice needs to be heard. Step up, serve the people. And when you're done serving and the job is done, you step back down and you go to your life and you continue on. And that's very much how I view the position that I'm in now. I went through a situation that I thought was unfair. It opened my eyes to the injustice in the judicial system, specifically into the family court system. And as a result of that, and talking to people, it motivated me to get involved. And so right now I have what they call an exploratory committee. And we are reviewing options within the state of South Carolina for me to step into. Um, we're trying to determine what the most impactful role will be. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. And it's probably about 18 months out, I think, or so. But as you know, it takes a long time to get these things going, to get on the ballots, to get signatures. And so I'm in the infancy, so to speak, but I'm also very motivated. So the exploratory committee that we talked about earlier is right now in effect in South Carolina. And the purpose of that is to determine where I can have the most value in a political run. So obviously, on a state level, you want to hit the highest point of representation, which is Congress, where you go off and you represent your state on a federal level. If that works out, that'll be the best. I think the most impactful way for my message for judicial reform to be heard. But I am open to other positions within the state.
Right. So, okay, well, politics, I could say this, that, you know, John would be somebody, politics is dirty. I've been in politics, but there are people in politics that, um, are good people in politics that takes the dirtiness out of politics, which I like to say. Um, if you ever run for politics, be that person that's inspirational and not negative. And, I've run for office. I don't like to talk about my opponent in any negative way. If anything, I speak positively of them. There's no really reason. I may be against their policies or something like that, but I'm certainly not going to lose a friendship over it either. I'm friends with so many people in politics. So, you know, um, it's been a learning experience for me, some ups and downs of you lose, you win. I will say when you lose, how you lose makes a difference. I've lost, and it's like if you hold yourself gracefully and act like an adult, probably you're going to get a lot of kudos from people seeing you lose too. And I think one race, I think I ended up better losing, I guess, as far as kudo points or whatever. It's like okay, and I'm friendly and on a first name basis with just about everybody in politics. So, your experience so far, I guess, has been enlightening, probably to say the least, right, John? And but you'll bring a lot to the table as far as experience and actually serving the people. We've been doing it all our lives. So if anything, you'd be the kind of politician I'd be voting for.
I appreciate that. And one of the things I tell you about folks like us that have served, truly served the people, is that ethics are a big deal. That we're not career politicians. And so several years ago, I was approached to run as the sheriff of Suffolk County to be the next sheriff. And it would have been an unopposed run at that time had I accepted the position. But I made a decision, a life decision at that time, to be closer to my family and to be down in the North Carolina, South Carolina area, just south of Charlotte, to be closer to my children. And for me, it was an easy decision. A lot of people, that would have been a really hard decision. It wasn't for me. It was a very easy decision. I moved closer to where my family was because I am not a career politician. And that's one of the things that I think that you and I both bring to the table. And we talked about earlier is like the founding fathers and the original thought process of service was you go, something motivates you to serve. You represent the people because what you're saying is a message that needs to get out. You deliver that message, you affect change, and then you step back down into your civilian life. And I think for people like us, we are good choices because we have spent the greater part of our adult life serving people we don't know. I've flown out in the middle of the night in bad weather for people I don't know. And I did it honorably, and I did it happily because it's what we chose to do. And you don't always get to brag about those things, right? And I laughed one time, and I'll just bring this thing as sort of an anecdotal thing. I was working out at the East End base, Gabreski Air Base, and a chief was coming out to deliver an award to us. And I remember standing there, and it was big, press and all this kind of thing for what we had done during a wildfire. And they left, and I went inside and laughed with my partner because all we did was point out hotspots and read over GPS locations. And they went and they put the fire out. But politically speaking, it was a big thing. You and I both know the stuff that we do, the stuff that we did is the stuff you'll never hear about. Flying in really bad weather, flying in marginal weather to make sure that you get the job done, stepping out there and maybe putting yourself in harm's way to try to get somebody to the hospital, to do an escort, to do all these different things that we did on a regular basis for decades. Those are the things, if you ask me, that are the hallmarks of people who are willing to get out there and serve. So I'm happy that you have a political position that you still carry, but I'm also happy that you do it ethically, and that you also, it's not just the politics of it. And you and I have talked even about business. I've heard you say, if the business is right, I won't take it, right? If it's not right, I won't take it. The same thing is in politics. I've watched people in Suffolk County literally go to jail over political appointed positions. I don't understand it, right? Like, your family is what's most important. Your freedom is what's most important. But if there's something that you think that needs to be said, step up and say it. And I think that, quite honestly, I think people that have served in the EMS community, in the fire community, in the law enforcement community, the military community, I think sometimes those are our best representatives. So I would encourage anyone that has a thought process in doing it, get out there and do it.
Well, the military needs you if you're watching, that's for sure. Your local fire department, EMS, be it EMT, police. If you're having a hard, it's not easy to get on the police job sometimes. You may miss it once. Keep trying. You'll get on. Keep trying. It's the heart that's going to get you on, and your honesty. I will say this, and I'm sure this applies to John as well. That when we were police officers, we took calls for service. We never asked what race somebody was, what sexual orientation they were, what religion they were, where they came from. And I'll give you one better, even if they were a criminal, we're coming to help them because that was our job. And we weren't going to let anything take that away from us, that professionalism. So it didn't matter who you were or what you were. If I got called to service to come and help you, I was there and I was going to do that. I know John was there too. So that's something, if you're thinking about going into law enforcement, fire department, or EMS, or any kind of a first responder, you're held so much higher in regard, just for what I just said. You're really a hero. And I know we have Batman and Superman, but the real hero, the real life superhero is you. It's people like John, Suffolk County Police, New York City Police, and thank you. I know New York City Police have had over the past couple of years a real hard time, just with the way things are socially, culturally lately. But I see that they are making a comeback and things appear to be getting better for their situation. But I back Suffolk County Police, NASA, all the Long Island departments, New York City. As we get older and our older age and our retirement age, I think we just become closer to these entities because they meant and still do mean so much to us. And to be a part of it, like you've been a part of Suffolk Police and NYPD and the agencies I've been a part of, they really do live inside of us forever. I have DNA of many police departments and military and fire department as well. It's DNA that will never leave my body to the day I die. So I know that's probably the same for you, John, I would imagine. But, you know, anything left, inspirational, maybe you could tell some viewers that might be watching that might want to go into service. John, I'll give you the last word. I'd love to hear more from you.
Absolutely. Appreciate that. So what I would say is this, like you said, there's a lot of challenges now. It's a different job than it was when you and I started. And so it takes a really special person, right? Like when we got on the job, we took the assignment to protect others, and we took it very seriously. We went out there and we did the job. I was never worried about what might happen to me for doing the right thing. And that's really a dynamic that unfortunately these new officers have to face because even when they do the right thing, everything's called into question. Everything is hyperanalyzed, and it doesn't necessarily matter whether or not your heart was in the right place or you were looking to do the right thing. It matters what the political perception is of what was done. And I'll give you a very small example. I remember one time them saying that a surgeon could be wrong. He could make a mistake. He could slip. And that's why he has medical malpractice. You slip, you're going to jail, right? So it's a very different dynamic for police officers and for people in other professions to consider. All of that being said, I will say this. I wouldn't change a single thing. And I think that it's still the greatest way to serve. It's such an unbelievable thing to do. I couldn't believe half the time I was getting paid and sometimes not paid so well. But I would do it again. And I think that it's an amazing opportunity. And I think, like you had mentioned, maybe some of the military folks, it's a great transitional job to come out of the military and to be able to continue to serve in a separate, different capacity. But don't get too discouraged by what's happening out there now. And the whole thing is this. I remember them saying one time, if you're worried about the job, act as if you're being recorded. Well, guess what? You are being recorded now. So
Well,
act, don't be afraid, do the job. And the biggest, most important thing is come home every night. At the end of the night, you're going to come home.
yeah. Well, it's been great to have you on. I'll have you on again. We'll see each other again, I'm sure, somehow, some way soon, whether it's on video or in person. I appreciate it. I will include your information on any links that we have below in the video. But love you. Thank you so much for your service. Thank you for protecting me and my family also while I was living in New York. I really appreciate it. And that goes for every Long Island and New York City police officer. Thank you so much. You guys are all in my heart all the time. Every time I see one of your vehicles go by, I get excited and I get happy to see it. So just like a kid, you know. But thanks for being on with us, John. I really appreciate it.
Likewise, thank you as well. Take care.
Bye bye.